What's up guys, Nishi from MST.TV here. In today's Market Watch episode, I want to quickly review with you guys the prices of cards from Rising Rampage. This is the first weekend that the cards are going to be widely available, with the set having officially dropped on Friday. So when you go to your locals, you can probably expect a lot of people to be opening packs from the newest set. And this is probably going to be true despite how a lot of people are talking about how this is one of the least appealing, the worst sets to come out in the last little while. That being said, it's always a good idea to be up to date on the prices of cards in the set, as well as have an idea of where prices are going to be going. If you're looking for a specific card, you should have an idea of what you want to pay, and alternatively, if you pull a card and you want to sell it or trade it, you should know approximately what it's worth and what you want to get out of it. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at some of the top cards from Rising Rampage, how their prices are currently looking, and where I think they're going to go to in the market. So yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so first up is the biggie. We have a new rarity in the TCG. Once again, we have the Prismatic secret rares. The pull rates for these are apparently about 1 in every 1.5 cases, which is a lot harder to pull than I was expecting originally. I actually thought they were going to be closer to what ghost rares were, where you were looking at like 2 to 3 per case, but apparently that's not what's happening here. So given how hard it is to pull these cards, it's only natural that we see them have quite high prices. However, when people were first posting these for sale, we saw some like absolutely ridiculous prices being thrown around, and I'm talking like $600 to $700 for a single copy of a Prismatic secret rare card. What I want you guys to keep in mind with these prices is that these were hugely inflated because they were coming out in the week between the sneak peek and the official set release. So the only people opening packs in between that time are people or stores opening product early that actually have access to those boxes. So there's limited quantity of those cards available on the market, and they're able to kind of dictate what the prices are by themselves. However, now that the set has officially dropped, there's going to be a lot more product that's going to be opened, and I'd expect the prices to dip down quite a bit more, and we've actually already started to see that. So Appaloosa is currently sitting on TCG Player for about $325 to $350, down from what people were asking for it originally, which was like $600 to $700. Now, this is clearly the most valuable Prismatic secret rare in the set, and it's going to be the one that's going to see the most play, so it will have the highest demand. That being said, I do think that the card is still going to decline in value, and I think that it's eventually going to settle at around $250, maybe $300. I don't think it's quite going to stay $300 because I don't think that price is quite sustainable. What we do have to remember is that this isn't the only version of the card. There are going to be plenty of people that are going to be perfectly content with playing a secret rare copy of the card. But I think that $250, given how hard it is to pull the card, is a pretty reasonable price for this card. Next up, we're going to look at Marincess Seahorse, which is a main deck Marincess monster. This card is usually an ultra rare, but it also comes prismatic. This card is currently sitting at around $150, and I actually think it's going to stay at around this price point, maybe dip down a little bit to around $140. So unlike Appaloosa, Appaloosa is like a staple card essentially, but you really only need the one copy of it. However, for those players who want to play Marincess, Marincess Seahorse is a 3-of in that deck, and Marincess are extremely likely to play sometime after Chaos Impact comes out, so eventually. And players who want to play their decks in max rarity, which is a lot of players, are going to want 3 copies of this card, so the demand is definitely going to help keep the price up somewhat, at least for a little bit. Whether or not Marincess actually do see a lot of play in the meta is still kind of something that needs to be decided, but if Marincess do become a viable meta deck, then I would certainly expect this card to stay at around the $140 to $150 price point. Okay, so next we have the other 2 Prismatic secret rares in the set, and these are what I consider to be the cheaper Prismatics. You'd still be happy if you pulled them, but you're probably wishing it was one of the other 2. So Storm's Dragon Return is probably going to be the least valuable of them. As a trap, the card is a bit slow, and I think it's the one that's going to see the least amount of play. On the other hand, Wind is an extra deck monster, and even though Wind isn't a particularly widely used attribute, it's still something that certain decks will be able to use, and also you could call it like a waifu card, so it's still probably going to retain some value. Now Storm's Dragon Return is currently sitting at around $150, whereas Win is sitting at around $160 to $170. We're only at the first weekend here though, and we've already seen these cards drop to these prices after being previously listed at around like $250 to $300. I am expecting these prices to fall to anywhere within the $100 to $120 price range, with Win being a little bit more on the expensive end compared to Storm Dragon's Return. Because these cards are also available as rares and supers, players will still have access to them, and therefore the players who are looking for these prismatic secret rares are probably after them solely for their rarity, and they're likely to wait until they're able to purchase them at a decent price. So as more and more of these cards appear on the market, the supply is going to increase, but the demand isn't necessarily going to increase at the same rate, and this oversaturation is going to cause the prices to continuously fall bit by bit. Obviously, everything that I've stated about these prismatic secret rares here is just my opinion. These cards are pretty unprecedented in that we haven't really had cards that are this difficult to pull from the main sets before, so it's really difficult to know exactly where they're going to go in terms of pricing. Alright, so on to the regular cards in the set. First up, we have Appaloosa, which is definitely by and far the best card in the set. The card is pretty versatile since you can make it with 2 monsters or 4 monsters. If you use fewer, it just gets weaker and it has less negates, but it still enables you to put those negates on board nevertheless. I think that this card is kind of like the going second version of Borrelsword Dragon, whereas where you're going second, Borrelsword is that big monster that you want to make to push for game. On the other hand, if you're going first, Appaloosa is the big monster that you want to set up to establish those negates for an unbreakable board. And that being said, I think that the price of Appaloosa is going to behave very similarly to Borrelsword's. So currently at its release, it's sitting at around $55. And I think that as more and more of the product is opened, the card is going to drop to around $40, maybe $45. But then as more and more people see the value in it, it's going to rise up back to that $60, maybe even higher price point depending on how relevant the card really becomes. That being said, if you have the opportunity to buy this card when it dips, I would definitely go ahead and do so. Even if you pay a little bit more for it, I wouldn't really mind, because the card really just is that strong and is likely to retain its value for some time. So we have a pretty big fall off from Appaloosa to our next highest value card, which is Marincess Coral Anemone. There are 2 Marincess secret rares in the set, but Anemone is the one that definitely has the more utility. It's a Link 2 that's able to retrieve 2 different cards from the graveyard. Currently, it's pretty affordable at only $17, and personally, I don't think Marincess is going to have a big impact on the meta right away, so I think it is going to drop in price until it hits around $10. However, closer to the time that Chaos Impact drops, I'd fully expect this card to jump back up in price, likely hitting that roughly $20 to $25 price point as people pick up the cards in order to play the deck. Next, we have Marincess Marbled Rock, which is a Link 3 monster. This card provides a lot less utility to the Marincess archetype than Coral Anemone does. It's not that the card is necessarily bad per se, it's just that it's outclassed by other Marincess Link monsters that will be available in Chaos Impact. It's currently already cheaper than Anemone at around $10, and I think it'll gradually drop down to around $5. So again, I think that closer to Chaos Impact's release date, the card is going to see slight increases in price. However, I don't think that those gains are going to be sustainable the same way that Anemones will be, and that ultimately the card is still going to sit at around $5. Okay, so next is Get Out. Which is the card that I pulled out Sneak, which I guess is like okay, but I also got the Sneak Peek mat, which was pretty cool. I think that this is a pretty solid card with a lot of potential. It's extra deck monster removal that isn't destruction, however it does target. We've seen cards like Compulsory Evacuation Device see play in the meta before, so it's definitely possible that this card will be used in some strategies. And ultimately its price point is going to depend on how viable back row is in the upcoming format. So if there is a spot for back row heavy decks in the meta and they're able to utilize this card to disrupt key plays in combo decks, I could definitely see this card jumping up to maybe $15 or $20. However, I think that at the same time, there's also a good chance that this card will be deemed too slow for the meta or not strong enough, and will therefore tank to around $5. This one's kind of up in the air. I definitely think this card has a lot of potential, but it does need the right circumstances in the meta in order to really see play. Alright guys, so we're struggling a little bit here. The second half of the secret rares from Rising Rampage are honestly really weak, nothing too great. First up we have Fortune Lady Every, which is currently sitting at around $8. It's a secret rare for a slow archetype that isn't really going to impact the meta at all. It's like the archetype isn't really too popular. The artwork I guess is nice, but aside from that, like there's nothing that's really going to be able to justify anything higher than like a $3 or $4 price point, if that. One of my friends actually pulled this card at Sneak Peek on the Saturday, so when we went to another Sneak Peek on Sunday, I told him to sell the card at the first chance he got. He ended up getting like $10 in cash and a secret rare Prankratops for it, so that was like a more proactive move on his part that was definitely worth it. But yeah, definitely a card that I'd move early on if you are unfortunate enough to pull it. So next we have Gizmek Orochi, which is kind of like a Fairy Tale Snow type of card. It's really niche. I think that it's only going to see play in really odd decks, kind of like Grenmaju da Aiza or DD Dynamite focused decks. So it's not going to be very popular. Some people are going to try to hype it up like it's the next Fairy Tale Snow, but the fact that you have to banish cards from the top of your deck, so you're banishing resources, and you can't banish those like cards that you mill into the graveyard, combined with the fact that you can only use one of its effects per turn, really limit the card, and it stops other decks from taking advantage of it. Currently it's only like a $7 card, and it'll probably settle at around $5. Inevitably, someone's gonna try to hype it up and talk about the card being super useful, but ultimately I don't see that as being very likely. Even if it does get hyped up, it's gonna drop back down really soon after, so I would definitely avoid trying to buy into this card for that reason. So now we have Witchcrafter Golem Aruru, which is currently a $5 secret rare. It's a potentially useful card, but really I don't think it's worth a secret rare spot. It could be used as generic spellcaster support, but we don't really have any viable spellcaster decks in the meta that could use this card. Also, Witchcrafters are a deck that don't really have a place in the meta right now, and they aren't likely to receive any support that will make the deck viable within the foreseeable future. So ultimately, I see this card being doomed to being just like $1 or $2, maybe like $3, but nothing really more than that, and I wouldn't really recommend investing in this card. And the last secret rare here, we have Capshell. I have absolutely no idea why they made this card a secret rare, and I don't think anyone else does either. This set's been out for basically like a day, and it's already only $3 for a secret rare card, which is kind of crazy. I really tried ways to think about how to utilize this card, but I couldn't really come up with anything. If it were like a level 1, you could use it and make Linkuriboh with it, but it isn't. If you like really tried, you could play it in some sort of ritual deck, and then you could like tribute it from your hand for a ritual summon and then draw, but there's like, that's so underwhelming. There's just no place in the meta for this card, and I don't really see how you could make this useful. Maybe they'll change something if they introduce Master Rule 5, kind of like how Tour Guide was originally a bust, and then Exceeds came out and it became like broken. But like, who really knows? If you pull this, I'm really sorry. This card is like the definition of a bust. Alright, so lastly, let's look at a few different ultra rares in the set that have retained some value and probably will still retain some value. So first up we have Romulus, the long-awaited Dragoonity Link monster. This card's actually pretty good, and I know that people are talking about how they use it in Dragoonities to make pretty strong turn 1 boards. So it isn't like a trash ultra rare, it's still going to retain some value. Next up, Shaman of the Tenyi is worth a little bit. The Tenyi cards are actually pretty popular. I saw a post on TCG Player on Facebook stating that the Tenyi cards were actually among the most heavily cards bought from the first day of Rising Rampage being out. So I think that like for the most part, the Tenyi archetype's actually pretty cheap. They're mostly like supers, rares, and commons, so Shaman is actually the highest rarity Tenyi card from Rising Rampage, so it's the last missing piece of an otherwise really cheap deck, so you are probably still going to be able to move it for like a few bucks. And then finally we have Marincess Seahorse, not the Prismatic Secret Rare version, the Ultra Rare version. This is the one that's budget friendly if you want to play Marincess. It is a key card in the deck since it lets you start comboing right off the bat, and if Marincess do become a meta deck, then I could see this card jumping up in price a bit more, but for now it is one of the better Ultra Rares that you can pull from Rising Rampage, because there are still going to be people who want to play Marincess as a deck. So for any of these cards, you're not looking at like crazy value the same way you'd be looking at some of the secret rares, and I don't think any of them really has the viability or usability of something like Borreload Savage Dragon that's going to command that like $25–$30 price point. However, right now they're all like $5 to $7 ultra rare cards, and I do see them retaining like $3 to $5 in value. I think that if you guys see these cards being pulled and you're able to trade a few dollars worth of value just to grab them, then I think they might be worth picking up for sure, especially if like that person who pulled them doesn't want to use them and just wants to trade them away. They make pretty good trade bait that you can move pretty easily within the near future. Anyways guys, that's it for this video. To be completely honest, Rising Rampage is a really underwhelming set. Like half the secret rares I would call complete busts, and even then there's only one real chase card in the set, excluding the Prismatic secret rares. I think that introducing the Prismatic secret rares here was definitely a good move on Konami's part, because if you're buying like a box or a case, it definitely gives you the possibility or the chance of getting back some of that value that you spent on the box, since most of the cards from the set that you pull aren't getting you that much value back. So yeah, something to always keep in mind is that prices are going to drop a lot after Sneak Peek, and then they're going to drop again after the official set release, just because of how much more a card is being made available on the market, and that's definitely something that you guys should be aware of when you're buying or selling these newer cards. So hopefully you're able to go out to your locals this weekend and maximize your value from this set. Make sure that you sell and buy things at the right prices without overpaying, especially for cards from a set like this. But yeah, so that's all for me today. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that thumbs up button for me and let me know in the comments section below what stuff you guys are looking at picking up from Rising Rampage. Let me know what your thoughts on the set are, especially if you disagree with some of my price predictions or have your own thoughts about certain things. I'm always looking to learn things about the Yu-Gi-Oh market because things are always moving so quickly, and obviously there's no way that I'm gonna know everything, and I just love to hear you guys' thoughts. And of course, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.